Welcome back to another Field of Glory 2 DLC, my friends. Today we're going to be taking a look at Sublime Porte and what it has to offer. And really, I think that Sublime Porte is a main focus on the Ottomans, also on the famous Timur the Lame, or Timberlane, if you know him better as that. And also has some discussion about the Balkans, and of course, how the Balkans went from Orthodox to Islamic to Orthodox to Islamic to any number of different things. And I'm going to show you just the 5 campaigns here available. Yes, 5 campaigns available here in this particular DLC, which I think is pretty damn impressive. Now, if you look Rise of the Ottomans, guys, which of course is all about the Ottoman dynasty, this one actually starts with Osman. You're going to want to take a look at Rise of the Ottomans. The other one that looks fascinating to me is the Timberlane one, and this really talks about one of the greatest conquerors of all time, Timur the Lame. Now, I'd love to be able to actually see how this one goes, so if you want me to do a campaign, let me know in the comments down below. Now, the other one is Matthias Corvinus, and this one I know a lot less about, but I do believe it's a focus on Hungary, which is very, very cool here. As you could see, Matthias and his older brother Ladislaus Hunyadi were imprisoned by King Ladislaus, and Ladislaus Hunyadi was executed. This caused a rebellion that forced King Ladislaus to flee Hungary. Really cool focus there on Hungary. And of course, we've got the Catalan Company. Now, these are actually Catalans that fought for the Byzantine Emperor. Very similar to how, like, Vikings fought for the Byzantines. Now, you've got some Catalans that also fought for the Byzantines, and you can follow their exploits. And, of course, there are many, many wars in support of the Byzantines here. So those are the 5 campaigns, which I think pretty damn cool. Let's take a look here at the battles, specifically the historical battles. Now, I should mention also that one thing that is quite important to mention is any of the Balkan kingdoms. So, for instance, Albania, Serbia. Don't quote me on Serbia, but I do believe it's Serbia, Albania, Bosnia. I'm pretty sure all of those have their own kingdoms except for Bosnia. And they do have new army lists. So there's a ton of new army lists in this DLC as well. But let's jump into the Sublime Porte battles and see what that has to offer. And let me tell you guys, some truly massive battles. And since, in fact, some of the battles in Sublime Porte are not necessarily... they'll be in history books, but the casualties for those battles will not be correct. There's just no way that 100,000 men can die in a medieval battle like this, or it's very unlikely. But you could see a ton of different battles with Ottomans against different Balkan kingdoms, of course, and Ottomans just in general against all sorts of different kingdoms, the Wallachians. Of course, you think of Vlad the Impaler, etc., and you do have Targoviste 1462. This is going to be a battle that Vlad the Impaler fought in. So, of course, you can pick Wallachian or Ottoman, but that's sort of the flavor of this DLC. I think you guys are seeing sort of a trend here, which is really a focus on the Ottoman conquests of the Balkans and the subsequent defense of the Balkans by, of course, the people there. So we're going to jump in here to one of the battles just to get a visual look. I don't think all that much has changed visually, but of course, anytime they update army lists, there is going to be a little bit of a difference. And actually, this battle in particular is not as impressive as some of the battles available. As you can see, we are truly riding in as the Wallachian cavalry into an Ottoman camp. A massive Ottoman camp. The Sultan is actually right there waiting for us. Of course, he's not expecting a massive Wallachian force to attack, but these are the kind of historical battles you can expect. Let's take a look at one of the more epic ones, just so I give you guys an idea of the expanse of this DLC. Now, let me introduce you guys to the Battle of Kosovo. That is right. This is, of course, the battle for Kosovo between the Serbs and the Ottomans. And over here, we've got the Serbian side absolutely looking vicious with a whole bunch of different light cavalry units as well as heavy cavalry units. We've got John of Palestina here, a bunch of Western mercenaries. Yeah, that's right. These mercenaries actually hail from the West to come and help us stop the Ottoman threat. And when we look at the Ottoman side, I mean, it is equally as impressive. just going up and down. These are, of course, horse archer units ready to show absolutely no mercy to our men. And back here, Sultan Murad himself standing with his many sipahis. And sipahis are essentially, I guess, like very, very heavily armored Muslim cavalry, essentially cataphracts, but for the Ottomans. So when I was telling you guys about monumental battles, certainly in Serbian history, and I'm not going to go too much into detail here because it's slightly controversial, but this battle would have had hundreds of thousands of losses on the Ottoman side. I'm not sure that's actually the case, but certainly the Serbs did manage to win some independence from the Ottomans. And this battle does show that, of course, the independence of the area of Kosovo, which even today continues to be a pretty contentious area politically. But that is the DLC in all intents and purposes. It's really the story of the Ottoman conquest of the Balkans fighting back, and some additional stuff thrown in there like the Catalan Company. See, I don't want you guys, and I'm going to going forward in this channel, I don't want you guys to just buy something for the sake of buying it. I want to give you guys, the straightforward truth. And this is pretty similar to every single other Field of Glory 2 DLC. The only reason I would recommend you picking this one up is if this particular part of history interests you. And actually, I recommend that for all Field of Glory 2 medieval DLCs. Get the ones that interest you the most. Now, I wanted to show you guys how the campaign system works here. We're not going to work our way through the entire campaign, but we're going to jump into Timberlane's campaign. Timur was born in 1336 into a noble family in the Turco-Mongol Barlas Confederation in Transoxania, in modern-day Uzbekistan. Rising to control by 1370, he went on to create the Timurid Empire in modern Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Iran. He won victories against the Golden Horde, the Delhi Sultanate, the Ottomans, and the Mamluks, becoming the most powerful ruler in the Islamic world. He was never defeated in battle, but his merciless treatment of his enemies resulted in repeated revolts, so he had to go back and reconquer some regions again and again. I didn't actually know that part, but it's absolutely fascinating. I also didn't know that his great-grandson created the Mughal Empire in India. But Timberlane really was a threat. I mean, just imagine being a threat to the Mongols, and Timberlane was that guy. Now, I had always been taught that Timberlane was a slave. Perhaps I learned wrong, or that he was a slave to a sultan or an Ottoman prince of some sort, and rose up through the ranks. I guess I'm mistaken on that, but nonetheless, really, really awesome. So obviously you've got difficulty settings here. I would suggest Baron for anybody that's played Field of Glory 2 before. Go for Baron. If you really want a challenge, obviously jump up here to Prince. I wouldn't do King. I just wouldn't. Now, we got the static progress, which means that the enemies aren't really going to get harder as you progress through the campaign. There might be different army lists, but for the most part, it's not going to be too much of a challenge battle to battle. I would go for this progressive because the difficulty will gradually increase and get harder and harder. So we go for that. We'd create. And the Chagatai Khanate had been split since the 1340s into Western Chagatai and Eastern Chagatai. By 1360, Timur was a senior officer in the forces of Western Chagatai. When Tughlaq Timur, Khan of Eastern Chagatai, invaded, Timur was sent to negotiate, but instead switched sides and was rewarded with Transoxania as Tughlaq's vassal. Tughlaq then changed his mind and attempted to install his son Ilyas Khoja as a ruler of Transoxania. Timur and his ally and brother-in-law Amir of Balkh rebelled. They were victorious at the Battle of Stone Bridge in 1363. So I believe the reason I was mentioning slave, I was confusing, I think, subject for slave. He was a vassal, essentially, that managed to sort of come to power and become one of the greatest, if not the greatest, general of all time. So let's jump into choice one. Of course, depending on whether you get a victory or a defeat, subsequent battles will have different choices, of course. And typically, I would go ahead and start, setting this up myself, but I'm simply going to autofill and accept. We are on the steppe, of course, and these are Timurlane's forces. I mean, again, I think Richard Bodley Scott, every single time, the guy does an amazing job at these representations, because they do look almost like Mongols. But just imagine that these forces are the kind of forces, Timur's forces, that even the Mongols would run in terror from. And of course, we are an Islamic faction, but I would say a little meatier, a little more vicious than even some of the main Islamic factions, like, of course, the Ottoman Empire. For my Hungarian viewers, I wanted to also show you the Jason Hunyadi focus here, campaign focus or epic battle focus. And I am ashamed not to know a lot about this fellow, but I do believe that he led one of the crusades with the Hungarians, offering quite a lot of troops to face the Ottomans in battle, of course. I don't know if he was successful, but perhaps we can play through. Well, I would assume he was, since Hungary remains a Catholic country to this day. Nonetheless, I would be curious to see the story here of Jason Hunyadi, also the story of Timberlane, of course. And if you guys would like to see that, if you guys want to see a campaign or you want to see a battle being played, I want you to tell me which one in the comments down below. In conclusion, I mean, this to me is a DLC I really enjoy because I consider the Balkan conflicts, and for that matter, any conflict between Christianity and another religion, I mean, it leads to absolutely massive wars. It changes history dramatically, and I think this DLC does a great job at revealing that and showing it to us. And often one of those conflicts that the medieval films, Hollywood medieval movies, don't typically represent. They like to stay in France, England, etc. They rarely jump into the Balkans, but if they did, the movie would be an absolute bloodbath. Of course, we know about, a number of different atrocities in the Balkans in the last few decades, but going back into medieval times, it may have been even more vicious. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this overview. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, especially if you go on to buy the game. I make no profit from any of these game purchases. If you buy Field of Glory 2, Sublime Porte, I don't make any money. So if you enjoy it, the best thing you can do is hit that like button, subscribe, join our channel as a member, and hey, let the developers know that you purchased the game because of the Agrippa Maxenius channel. If you can do that much, you're really helping me out. And again, if you want to see a battle, you know what to do, and we might have one tonight. Thank you so much, folks.